I would highly recommend taking your kids to school, just driving them to school, dropping them off, riding a bike, walking with them, whatever it is, especially if you have a high school student, because you get a chance to be able to learn some stuff that a lot of times you wouldn't otherwise get a chance to be able to hear. And I went out to my car the other day, went out to the truck, and I found myself getting into the passenger side. And as I was getting into the passenger side, it was because my daughter was getting into the driver's side, which is kind of crazy. McKenna is 15 years old, and I'm about to be 16 in December. And so she's driving with her permit, whatever it is. She gets in the car, adjusts her seat, adjusts her mirror, adjusts the music, gets ready, and she turns to me and she's like, "Hey, did you hear?" And I said, "Did I hear what?" And she's like, "So-and-so started to holler." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" She was talking about a boy started to holler at her again. And she was excited because he like snapped her or was on TikTok or whatever it was. And then I said, "Well, how do you feel about it?" And she said, "Well, since him and I, they talked before, and since him and I talked before, he kind of ghosted me back in the day. So, you know," and I said, "Well, how do you feel about that?" And she said, "Well, there's 3 girls that he's talked to since me, and all of them just got boys in their life that they started talking to. So I kind of feel like it's that he wants to talk to me because all of them are taken." And I was like, "Oh," I said, "How's that feel?" She's like, "I don't want to be number 2. And I said, "That's my girl." That's what I was thinking in my head, but I had to keep myself quiet because if you talk a lot as a dad to a 15-year-old, you lose them. You just want to listen. You want to ask questions. You want to listen. And so she said that. She said that emphatically. Like, "I don't want to be number 2. I don't want to be second." I said, "Cool. I mean, okay, so tell me more." So she told me these stories as we go along. And then, you know, right at the end, as we were getting done with our ride, I got to share with her something that my mama, as I call her, or her Grammy, told me. She said, "Always keep the admission high, son." And I said, "Well, what do you mean by that, Mom?" And she said, "Well, those people who you are excited to be able to talk to, they're lucky to be able to talk to you." And this is what I got to share with my daughter. All those boys that are starting to holler at you, they're lucky that they get the opportunity to even holler at you in the first place. And so I said to McKenna, keep your admission high. Because if they don't have the admission into that park, then they're fine. They're fine. You just don't need them around in your life. But keep the admission high as opposed to dropping the admission because you like to be liked or it feels good at this time. And she looked at me and she was like, "You're right, Dad. I don't like being second." I said, "Keep that because you are so valuable." It's crazy because in Proverbs 30, it takes us through that. And it's a testament that God doesn't want to place second in our life either. The same way that my daughter didn't want to feel second in this situation, God doesn't want to feel second in our life either. He wants us to be able to spend time with him. He wants to be first. And then he promises that he will add so much value to you and encourages you to keep the admission so high that the people that can't afford the admission into your presence just won't be around anyway. And it's amazing because when people cannot afford you, it's okay. It's completely okay, but keep the admission high and make sure that you don't allow yourself to be second in any area. And that's where God wants to be in our lives. So why don't we get this party started?
Achieving, cause we believing it's for certain. We put the work in. We ain't stopped just because it's hurting right before your eyes. So it's coming to no surprise. The takeover is televised over and over and over again. Make no mistake, we continue to win. Defeat never known, cause I will not lose. They wanna mimic my moves, but can't walk in my shoes.
Well, the Vibe Room isn't second. It's the first. It's the number one coolest event in all of Salt Lake City. And it is unbelievable. It's a live version of the podcast, going to be the Edison House, one of the coolest venues out there. You've got Baron Baptiste. You've got Janae Thompson. You got Coach Keith Hale. You have Curtis Nieder. You got James Dixon's going to be in the house. Sean Finnegan going to be in the house. It is going to be an unbelievable experience. So make sure you grab your tickets. Grab the book too if you don't have the Vibe. It's in the link is in the bio. You could get it on Amazon. Get it for your whole entire company and your organization. It talks about the 5 things in your company: your culture, your systems, your productivity, your innovation, and your ability to adapt immediately. But none of that matters if people don't feel great about it. So it's not the energy you bring into the room. It's simply the way that people feel when you leave. And that's the secret ingredient that can change everything, which is the vibe. So check those out. Do those things. That's the station identification. My daughter taught me on the way to school that I don't want to be second. That's what she told me. I don't want to be number 2, Dad. I don't want to be number 2. And I got to share with her Grammy wisdom, which was like, keep the admission high, girl. Keep the admission high. And when that admission is high, people will eliminate themselves that can't afford you anyway. And so how can we do that in our lives? Well, first of all, is that God wants to be number 1. He doesn't want to play number 2. He doesn't want to play second fiddle to anybody or anything. And so in verse 1 through 4, it was just a quick one. You better recognize. We used to use this all the time. And if you're around my age, I'm in that 49. I'm 49 and a half. And if you know what I'm talking about, you better recognize. You would have people say that to you all the time, that you would say something, that you would challenge their character, challenge their game, and they'd be like, you better recognize. Well, I believe that that's what God is telling us in verse 1 through 4 of Proverbs, in Proverbs 30, is just, you better recognize, like, here I am. Recognize who you are and recognize who I am. In verse 5 and 6, it said, why would you have number 1 play number 2? That's the silliest thing in the world. Not play against each other, but play for each other. So if you had Tom Brady as a quarterback and you put him at center, that would be silly. If you had Ray Lewis and you put him at quarterback, he probably wouldn't be who he is, even though he was on the Ravens, and I don't like the Ravens at all. I'm a Titans till I die. Although, Ray Lewis, if you take Eddie George, one of the greatest running backs of all time, and you put him at wide receiver, he probably doesn't do what he did in his career. So why would you have number 1 play number 2? And this is what God is asking. Like, I'm number 1. Why are you going to have me play number 2 or number 3 or number 4? Or sometimes it's number 10, right? And so in 5 and 6, it talks about that. In verse 7 through 9, it hits with 3 words that really changed my life. Commitment eliminates options. I heard a guy speak one time. He said he was married for 45 years. He said, a lot of people ask me how I got to be married for 45 years. He said it was simple. 3 words. Commitment eliminates options. I was committed to my wife, and it eliminated the option of any other woman in my life but her. Well, imagine this. Imagine if whatever you're committed to eliminates the options of anything contrary to that commitment. Imagine what can happen, right? So commitment eliminates options. CEO, it's a different way of thinking about CEO. And I tell you, it is absolutely, it's an absolute game changer for us. In verse 10 through 14, watch this. This was nuts. My mom would always say this to me, right? She would say, watch your mouth. And then she would always say, guard your heart. And then she would say, watch your mouth. And then she would get, guard your heart. Watch this. Watch your mouth. It will tell you what is in your heart. Your words are valuable, so guard your heart. Because your heart, when it's filled up, the overflow of that is your words. So watch your mouth, meaning, watch what you're saying. Whatever you say came from your heart. And then, if that's the case, your words are so valuable, so guard your heart. Because if you guard your heart, you'll be able to know what's going to be able to come out your mouth. And once it comes out your mouth, your hands and your feet, you start to move towards it. You speak it into existence. You start walking towards it. But all your words are an overflow of your heart anyway. So what's going into your heart? So guard it. That's what my mom was saying. Now I get it. Thank you, Mama. I love you. Hercules, Hercules, Hercules. And in verse 15 and 16, if it wants everything and delivers nothing, cut it off. If it wants everything and delivers nothing, cut it off. There's so many empty promises that a lot of times the world will tell us. If you get this house, then you'll be good. You get this relationship, you'll be good. You get this money, you'll be good. You get this car, you'll be good. And it wants everything, but it doesn't deliver anything. Then on the flip side of it, wisdom only requires your attention and delivers everything. Bang, bang, biggity bang. In verse 17, respect will pay massive dividends. Pretty self-explanatory there. And in verse 18 through 20, high altitude makes circumstances diminish. The higher you go, the smaller the challenge seems when you're high above it. So keep your altitude high. How can that happen? By having a phenomenal attitude, because your attitude determines your altitude. Always find a way. There's always a way to be able to figure stuff out. Everything's figure outable. There's a book that talks about that, and my brother says it all the time. And really, there's always a way. Is there a way for me to get Maxwell on the podcast? Yes. Is there a way for me to figure out how to get De La Soul? Yes. But we've just got to figure it out and find a way. Then the next one is small things make big differences. Small things make big differences, and a little bit of fire still burns. So be conscious of what you're playing with. A little bit of fire still burns. High altitude makes circumstances diminish. Always find a way. Small things make big differences, and a little bit of fire still burns. In verse 21 through 23, don't let them take your lunch. And this was a thing that my pops would always talk about. Like when preparation meets opportunity, it creates success. But you got to be prepared. Don't let someone else take your lunch because you're not prepared. Don't let them take your lunch. And I tell you, like my lunch has been taken so many times because I wasn't prepared at that particular time. In verse 24 through 28, write consistent work. Work your unfair advantage. Kick your own butt. And when you do this, you'll have unqualified favor. Settle into that for a second. In verse 29 and 31, my dad used to always say this, don't let your alligator mouth overload your parakeet butt. Do the work in the dark, so when the light shines on you, you'll be ready. Prepare when no one else is watching. Wars are won in peacetime preparation. And as we finish up, in verse 32 through 33 is just this. Always follow number one. Always follow number one. God is saying, I want to be number one in your life. Well, if he's number one, we got to treat him that way. And just like my daughter didn't want to be second, God wants to be number one. He wants to be number one. And when he is number one in your life, he will create so much crazy amount of value that the people that don't have the money for the admission that you charge to be able to get into your sphere, they can't afford you. They'll eliminate themselves anyway. Number one is never okay with playing number two. Following number one will always keep the admission high where the knuckleheads cannot afford it. So I ask you, who is your number one? McKenna, that's my daughter. I want to thank you so much. You bring me so much wisdom. And this has been Proverbs 30. If you're not going to the Vibe Room, you're missing out. If you don't have the book, you're missing out. If you haven't checked out High Fives Foundation, you're missing out. But come and hang with us. Subscribe, comment, share it with your friend. This has been Proverbs 30. My name is Kelly Cardenas, and I'm officially off the hot seat. Peace, love, and soul.